Welcome back, everybody. Kamala Harris had a lot of interesting things in that CNN interview. Of course, it's in the eye of the beholder, of course. But one of the things that caught my attention is her openness to picking a Republican on her cabinet. That might strike some of you as unprecedented, but it really isn't. But here's how she laid it out. This is from Kamala Harris. Oh, I guess we did not have that clip. That's what she said, that she would be open to that. My apologies for my confusion there. A fellow who was clearly that Republican in a Democratic cabinet, but otherwise for a Democratic president, was William Cohen, highly regarded, a former U.S. Defense Secretary under Bill Clinton. Secretary, always good to see you. So there is precedent for this. There have been others post you, but they are rare. How did you deal with that?
Well, number one, it was not expected, Neil, and thank you for having me on. It's been a while since I've seen you. But in any event, it did not come as a total surprise. I had met with President Clinton. He knew that I had not been a supporter of his. I did not contribute to his campaign. I didn't vote with him much of the time. And so it was totally unanticipated until the one meeting I had at the White House, and we explored the possibility not of me joining his cabinet, but just talking philosophy in general. And then I had a second meeting, and we talked more specifically about whether I'd be willing, if he were to nominate me, would I be willing to accept it? And I had a very great discussion with him. I said, Mr. President, number one, if you were to offer, if I were to accept, you'd never have to worry about me going behind your back and telling my friends on Capitol Hill what was going on down at the White House. But secondly, you'll have to promise me that if I am offered the job, accept, that you will never involve me in a political discussion. And he said, basically, you've got it. And it was a great relationship. I think it was the first time it had ever happened in modern history where an elected official from a different party had been appointed, certainly to that high an office of Secretary of Defense. So It was a wonderful relationship. We got along very well. And it was the highlight of my career in politics.
Yeah, it's usually someone outside the political sphere. You were a senator and all of that. But I always wonder how, Secretary, that worked out for you, because you were highly regarded and praised by both sides throughout your stewardship. But you were working in a Democratic administration. I've heard this from, Democrats who've worked in Republican administrations as well. They feel like odd man or woman out, and that they're not trusted or they're looked at with eyes rolling from other members at a table. How did you deal with that?
I think the first couple of weeks were a little bit unique in that Democrats obviously were wary of me assuming that position. And Republicans were upset that I was assuming that position. But after the first few weeks, it went by without any hitch whatsoever. And I think it is largely due to two people, the President of the United States and also Sandy Berger, his national security advisor.
Right.
They made me feel right at home. President Clinton gave me almost everything. I would say 95, 97% of everything I asked for the Pentagon, for the Department of Defense, he granted to me. So there were virtually no differences. And as I said, it was the most exciting, exhilarating, exhausting experience of my lifetime, but I will always be grateful to President Clinton for giving me that opportunity to represent the finest military in the world.
Well, I don't want to blow your smoke, Secretary, Senator, but you were very good, Defense Secretary. You weren't a nut. You weren't crazy. And I think we live in an age right now where they're polarizing. And I mean that to disparage both sides. It's gotten so polarizing now that if you say anything cross about anyone, if you're a Republican, or the same if you're a Democrat, you're dead, and you can't advance the ball. And I wonder if some of the more popular presidents we've had in the past could survive it in this environment today. So how do you think that is going, and whether you could survive in this environment today?
Well, I think you saw some of that. First of all, President Joe Biden, he and I went to Capitol Hill together way back in 1972. And so we've known each other over those years. He's been a good friend. And I think he has made every effort to try to bring people together. And he did that during this most recent term. I think that's been followed through by
You would be shocked to hear that Republicans disagree with you on that. But continue that thought. Go ahead.
Well, but he did get a major infrastructure bill, the first one of that magnitude since Eisenhower. So I would say that was a major accomplishment since it hadn't been done before. He did get a CHIPS bill and other bills passed in a very partisan atmosphere. So I think he made an effort to bring the parties together, to bring Republicans down, to say, how can you be a part of this? The Republicans might disagree, but I think he made an attempt. I think Kamala Harris is trying to do the same thing by saying, number one, she would have a Republican in her administration, but to see the number of Republicans who spoke at the Democratic National Convention, I don't think that's been done before, certainly on that scale. So I believe she understands that you can't get much done in this country unless you find some middle ground.
No, well, I agree with you on that. But some of the Democrats who had these Republicans invited, there were Republicans who were very angry and feel abandoned by their party with Donald Trump. A lot of them, Kinzinger and some of these others. We all know that, and that comes with the turf. I understand that, Secretary, but that it is very hard within a cabinet to stand out in this environment today. It could change with the Kamala Harris, just as it might with the Donald Trump if he gets back in there and wants to appoint a Democrat on his cabinet. But how do you see that going?
It depends on what position that Republican or Democrat is going to occupy. If it's the president of the United States has to be satisfied with the philosophical basis on which she or he would be selecting a high-level cabinet official. So you have to be comfortable. You have to share basically the same viewpoint. For example, my friend and colleague at my firm, General Jim Mattis, he resigned. Marines rarely resign, but he resigned on the position of SecDef because he believed he no longer shared, or the president no longer shared his view, worldview for the need for allies around the globe. And so he decided that he could not serve him well. The president is the one who is elected. The president is the one who sets the agenda. And so if you can't live with that agenda, you never should serve. So the president has to be satisfied that the person that he or she picks is someone who will carry out his or her agenda.
That is very well said. I'm glad you clarified that as well, Secretary, that John Mattis resigned as Defense Secretary. He wasn't fired by Donald Trump.
Right.
He left. He wasn't canned. Always good seeing you, sir. Thank you very much. We'll have more to this.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.